So welcome everyone to today's live demo session where we'll show you how to build a NetSuite with AI. Today we're going to cover how to implement custom logic without slowing down development, use AI-built connectors that adapt intuitively to custom fields, and reduce development cycles to days rather than months. So my name's Sophie. I'm going to be the host for today. And then I'm going to just quickly pass over to George, let him introduce himself. At the end of today's session, we'll have time for questions, but if anything crops up during the demonstration, feel free to pop them into the chat. Okay, so over to you, George.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sophie. So yeah, thanks so much everyone for taking the time. So I'm George, I'm our head of growth at Sorry. So along with Sophie, work on our webinars and a lot of our demos. As Sophie mentioned today, we're going to go through mainly the critical challenges you face when building a NetSuite integration and how the Sorry platform can tackle those, particularly around kind of connector requirements and workflow logic. So we've all been in a situation like this where you got to implement a NetSuite integration, whether you're implementing NetSuite to Shopify, NetSuite to Limworks, NetSuite to another system, and you hit one of two problems. Either that particular NetSuite instance, that NetSuite account for that customer has a number of custom fields, maybe even an entirely custom object that they've added within their NetSuite environment. Immediately, the pre-built connector that you might have for NetSuite now no longer matches the customer's environment. And so you're left with either having to adapt that connector, that immediately takes time, and of course time is always money when it comes to integrations, or you're left effectively trying to build a workaround. And neither of those are a really sustainable option. The second problem we commonly see across ERP integrations and with NetSuite is upgrades. You have the connector that's on a 2.1 spec for the integration you've offered. And NetSuite does their quarterly integration update. They push maybe an update to their orders object. And immediately now you've got a difference that you have to manage for the difference between the two specs. And if your integration runs on that particular or utilizes that particular object or field, now you've got either to go update the customer or the customer needs to run on the old spec. Either way, you end up with a level of tech debt that requires maintenance investment. Both these cases are very common across integration. And as a result, they add to the time to set up the integration, to begin building the integration. Time in development can take you from 3 months to 6 months when projects begin to overrun. And once the integration is deployed, the tech debt adds to that maintenance backlog, and that maintenance backlog again becomes further cost. And so when we look into kind of why that's the case, really that comes down to the state of pre-built iPaaS connectors that exist today. And so what do I mean by pre-built connector? If you've ever worked with a platform like Workato or Tray or MuleSoft, a pre-built connector is the component they have that standardizes the connection to NetSuite or to SAP or to Limworks. It has an understanding of the core fields, the core objects, how that system authenticates, the rate limits, everything you need to connect to it. The problem with a pre-built connector is it can't really adapt in any of the scenarios we've just put forward. If you have custom fields and you now need to go edit that connector to handle those custom fields, that can add weeks to a project. You've got to understand what custom fields exist for the client. You've then got to implement them. You've then got to test and make sure you're getting the right API payload back for that connector. That low level of customization immediately adds professional services cost. The second challenge, or the second issue with pre-built connectors, is the fact that, as we touched on before, maintenance then becomes a challenge the moment you have multiple specifications, particularly if you then have an API or a connector that you've updated for custom fields and now need to update for a new spec too. You're effectively doubling or compounding that maintenance over time. And so this diagram on the right really shows that quite nicely. You have some form of API change, a new version, a deprecated endpoint, an auth change, rare, but it does happen. And now you've got to go in and reconfigure that connector. You reconfigure that connector, and now you need to retest the integration. You retest the integration, you redeploy it, you put it back to your monitoring, and that cycle just continues. And when you have a system like NetSuite that updates quarterly, or a system like Amazon that can update almost once a week at this point, that effort to continually maintain those connectors exponentially grows over time. So at Visori, we specialize in and really focus on how do we remove the cost that's associated with pre-built connectors. And that's where our Connect agent comes in. Our Connect agent aims to achieve everything that a pre-built connector does. It connects to a system, it has a full understanding of endpoints, it handles all the authentication, it handles all the pieces necessary to connect to any API. But it is much, much more dynamic in its approach, and therefore is not limited by some of the kind of nature of pre-built connectors. And that really touches on two things. One, how does it handle APIs? And two, how does it handle maintenance? So we're going to hop into a demo in a little bit, but really there are two components that make the Connect agent different. The first is, instead of having a pre-built connector, we're able to dynamically absorb API docs, and the connector agent will take those, read them, and then turn that into a connector on the fly. The second piece is, once we have that connector established, once the Connect agent has turned that documentation into a connector, we can add credentials, curl request up into the system, and pull down any custom fields, custom requirements, objects, business logic that was not in the documentation. What that really means at a business level is, beforehand, you had a connector that was really only able to offer a limited number of API endpoints, those that are being pre-configured. Now we can update that connector to handle any endpoints as long as it's in the documentation. That means if you push an API update, or if you simply have an API that you've never built a connector for before, that process of adding that connector is very simple. The second business benefit really comes in our ability to handle custom endpoints that are quite common in ERPs. So previously, as we said, a pre-built connector only offered the fields that was aware that NetSuite had. Now, when we curl request up into the customer's environment and grab that curl request, we now have an understanding of not just the core endpoints, but also any custom endpoints, any custom objects. And we can reconfigure the connector to handle those. So now your NetSuite connector isn't just a generic NetSuite connector, it's a NetSuite connector specific to your customer. And that makes the kind of ongoing process of building the integration and maintaining the integration a lot simpler. The final piece is, you built the integration, it's in production, but now every time NetSuite pushes an update, the maintenance with the Connect agent becomes much more simple. Instead of an update occurring, you now having to go and understand, okay, how is that going to impact the integration that I built? We can push that update in a mere matter of seconds, and the system, which we can get to in a minute, will automatically version control for that change in the API. So we're going to hop in and give you a quick demo. And you can see here, I've added a very simple prompt on a NetSuite integration that I want to build into Shopify. So all I've said is, every time an order is processed in Shopify, create the order for the relevant customer in NetSuite. And you can see here, the platform's begun to go away and build the integration. And then we're going to walk through the first 2 or 3 core steps that get us to establishing the connector. So the Visori platform has 3 kind of core stages. You can see them up on the left: plan, connect, and build. In the plan phase, the platform is going away and taking our initial prompt and doing 2 things. One, it's looking at the over 5,000 API specs that we already have in our RAG architecture. NetSuite and Shopify being 2 very common systems, both exist in that RAG. And second, it's running a deep internet search. And you can actually see here it's gone away. It's looked at NetSuite's latest API version for 2025 for invoice creation, order processing, webhooks, all the information it might need to build an integration. And it's then compiled that into a set of research documents. So you can see here it's begun to look at each of the 2 systems, how we handle everything from authentication to endpoints to webhooks to retries. It's also then begun to plan, and we'll get to this a little more in a minute, how it might actually build that integration. And we can talk through that in a few future slides. It will then ask you a set of questions. Those questions effectively cover design critical decisions necessary for a solution architect or a human in the loop to make to ensure the integration functions exactly as you would want to expect. And again, we can touch on those a little more in a second. And then finally, it will generate workflows. Now, you'll notice down here this connect button. And so if I go to the connect tab, this is where we manage the process of building and testing connectors. Under this UI sits the connect agent. And so the connect agent has gone away and will now build out a NetSuite connector and a Shopify connector. So I'm just going to run these here. And during this process, it's going to establish what endpoints exist, what webhooks, how do I handle the authentication. So if I click here, you can see that it's picked up that NetSuite is OAuth 1. It will also then allow us to manage connections to this system. So you can either add a single set of NetSuite credentials here, or you can move it to embedded if you want that integration to be multi-tenanted, meaning more than one customer might be using this integration. Within here, you can now see it's also pulled down the fundamental NetSuite objects. So that's create customer, get invoice, look up item, etc. It's also done the same for Shopify. And again, we have the Shopify connection here. This time it's OAuth 2. It's also set up the callback URL for us. Within this, we could then go in here, manage the authentication, add a set of customer credentials. The connect agent will then curl request up into that particular NetSuite instance, grab any custom fields or custom objects, and reconfigure the connector. And those additional fields would appear right here, listed under NetSuite. As we said, that means now for the agentic architecture underneath Vasori, we not only have an understanding of the systems we're working with and what you want to achieve from the integration, but before we build the integration, we also have an understanding of the exact customer instance for NetSuite. So we'll complete this integration in a little bit. The question now is, great, we can connect to a system and we can do that dynamically. And as we said, really there's three core business value props there. I can now connect to any API. I can connect to that API and handle any custom configuration the customer might have, very common in ERPs. And I can then push updates to that API seamlessly without having to spend weeks reconfiguring a connector. Once we have the connector though, now we actually want to build the integration. And you'll see here, this diagram on the screen really walks through like high level how the Vasori platform executes that process. On the left, stage one, it's documentation links, files and attachments, and an in-depth prompt. Now, my one-line prompt wasn't very in-depth, but you can see how I inputted that into the system. We gave it a prompt. Every time an order is processed in Shopify, create that order in NetSuite. You can add files and attachments and documentation links. So you will have seen a little file icon on the right-hand side in that UI. If you were working with a system that our platform was unfamiliar with, you could add a link to documentation. And we've even seen customers add whole slides where they've been working with a customer and they've sketched out in a set of slides how the integration is going to work. You could upload those slides to the platform and use that, and the platform would read the slides or read the diagram or read even a picture of a whiteboard diagram and build that integration. So it's very contextually aware based on this. It will then go away, set up, the connect agent will then generate the connectors, stage two, and that's what we just walked through a minute ago. Then the plan agent is going to take both the knowledge it has from the connect agent and the knowledge we've uploaded here and plan the integration. And by that, we really mean design. And as we looked at before, there are two subtasks occurring there before the plan agent executes. One, it conducts a very deep internet search. It's looking for documentation. It's looking for knowledge bases around the two systems, around the integration. And then it will ask design critical clarifying questions. A great example might be, I didn't specify which system is the source of truth. And in certain workflows, that's very critical. So Vasori will ask, does this integration need to be bidirectional, or should it be one way, and therefore should one of them be the source of truth or not? The plan agent will then go away and design the integration. So it's using everything it's understood about what you're trying to build, the two systems it's working with, all the endpoints it has available, including the custom endpoints we pulled during the code request. And it will then design the integration. And that's from what is the trigger, what is the workflow logic, and what is the output on the other end. It will also create a set of success criteria. And the success criteria is important because when you're testing the integration, we want something to test against. So we have a way of checking if that integration is functioning as we expect. The plan agent, and we'll get back to the demo in a second, and we can show you the output of the plan agent. So the plan agent generates solution documents. And the solution documents are a human readable set of materials that outline, as I just said, the exact design of the integration, the acceptance criteria, the connectors, and how we're going to handle that, as well as things like error handling and logging. It will also design into the integration. That solution document then gets handed to our build agent. And it's the build agent that actually goes away and builds the integration, both in a low-code format for business analysts or similar personas who might not have an ability to code, and then also in a code format. And the code format is really there to enable you to have the full control of the integration without any limitations of code, of a low code. So at a high level, this is how the Vasori platform works. What it means for the integration is, one, the process of setting up a connector, which around ERPs might be a couple of days to a couple of weeks, depending on how custom that connector, how custom that NetSuite instance is, now a matter of a few minutes. Second, it means the building, the design of the integration, the work a solution architect does, is augmented 95%. So instead of spending 2 to 3 weeks designing the integration, trying to read documentation, trying to check if that documentation even represents the API in the way we think it does, that process is now down to a mere matter of hours. Once those two are complete, the process of building integration, particularly with modern kind of coding platforms like Claude, or coding models rather, then becomes relatively trivial once you have a very powerful kind of planning agent. As we mentioned before, the plan agent has gone away and it has designed the integration. And you can actually see that here in this document. So it's then going to ask us a set of critical questions. And these questions are designed that you can't execute the integration until you answer them, as they're meant to be design critical. So I'm just going to go through and quickly answer these just for the sake of time. So we're going to answer this one. And we're going to say here, new order created, just so that has an answer. Okay, so we're going to click ignore for some of these. So you can see here, some of these questions do require quite a thorough understanding of the systems you're working with. And that's really because the platform, while it is capable of doing 95% of the work extremely quickly, there is still a need for a human in the loop. And we actually think that's important because it's really the human that can translate what your customer wants to what the integration needs to function like with the most accuracy. But for now, I'm just going to go through and ignore these just so we can continue forward with the demo. So I'm then going to generate the workflows. And this is where the planning step really comes into play, is the platform will take everything we've just assembled, the connector, the research, the documentation, the co-request, we have the understanding of custom fields, all the questions we just submitted around the specifics of the integration and how we want it to function. It's going to take all that information and it's going to use it to write a final scope, a final design, a final plan of how that integration should function. And that plan will include not only the design in the sense of each workflow, how is it going to be triggered, what is the workflow logic, how are the mappings going to work, and what is the output, but also things like how is it going to handle errors? How is it going to conduct logging? How is it going to manage updates? So it really is very comprehensive. So you can see here, it's gone in, it has an understanding of the trigger every time a new order is processed in Shopify, i.e. it's marked as paid. This, we didn't tell it early on, but it's figured out that's how it's going to mark a new order in Shopify. It's then going to look at the business logic. We're going to extract order details, ensure the customer already exists in NetSuite or create them if they don't, map the order, etc. The final result, a new invoice in NetSuite. This user stories is what allows us to map success. So here we can determine if the integration is functioning as we expect. And you can see here the prompt. And this is what it's actually going to feed to our build agent to build the integration. I can now go to build. We'll let this populate for just a second. You can see here it's pulled in the workflow we just generated. I'm going to hit build. And the platform's now going to go away and build this integration. And so the platform will write the integration in two formats, as we mentioned before. A low-code environment that allows you to see building blocks of an integration, very helpful if you're non-technical or don't want to get into the technicals. And then it will write a code version. That code version is great if you want really granular control, or if you're a developer and that's just your preferred way of working. We'll let this run for a minute. Normally this platform, the system can take 3 to 5 minutes to run this. It's doing a lot of in-depth processing on the way. So in the meantime, we're just going to hop back and finish off our slides.
Before we go any further, George, we do have another question in the chat from Matthias. It says, Is it possible to develop integrations to systems without standard API or to a specific web service? If so, how does that work?
Yeah, the Connect agent is designed, so under the Connect agent, there's actually something called a connector engine. That connector engine is equipped with all the necessary pieces to understand a variety of auth, a variety of protocols. So OpenAPI, SOAP, XML, EDI, etc. And so with those pieces and its ability, the agent's ability to orchestrate them in different ways, the flexibility of the flexibility of what APIs it can handle is in theory limitless. An API doesn't have to be an open API spec to work in the platform. You could throw in a SOAP. And we've even seen some customers literally throw in like a description of an API at a very high level of here's a few objects, but very much written in a non-traditionally machine readable format. And the platform's capable of turning that into a connector. It can also connect to things like S3 buckets, different other forms of kind of web service. And so, Matthias, let us know if that doesn't answer your question. I'm happy to book in a one-on-one and show you some examples of it connecting to things that are very non-standard. But yeah, I hope that covers your question. On the screen, also, if there are any other questions, now is a great time to begin throwing those in as we begin to move towards the kind of final few slides. So on the screen, we have a really good case study. And while not NetSuite specific, it really highlights the work, what you're able to achieve with an ERP system. So Cispro is one of Vasori's biggest partners. We've worked with them for over 12 months at this point. And so when Cispro came to us, they faced a lot of the same challenges you get with a NetSuite connector. You've got customers that have configured their Cispro so the fields don't look like the standard fields anymore. You've got workflow logic that's extremely difficult to work with and very complex for a human to sit there and try and figure out. And then you might be connecting to systems that are non-standard, that are customized, that don't have a lot of the clean and neat features that a lot of software does. And so working with Cispro, we've really been able to showcase the integration, the power of Vasori's integration platform in a few ways. One, beforehand, they were spending 3 to 4 weeks customizing just the connector. That's before you start building the integration. Now that process can be done in a few minutes to a few hours, and even the most complex system might only take a couple of days to get the connector functioning. And that top end really includes maybe you have custom auth, maybe you're deploying to a private cloud, maybe the number of custom fields is into the hundreds. That's really that upper band of complexity. The second thing is building an integration. So you have the connector, now you need to build the integration. With Cispro, that previously was a 3 to 6 month endeavor. As a large software company operating focused on the mid-market, and you need to be able to offer hundreds of pre-built integrations to really support your client base who don't want to be building custom integrations all the time. That 3 to 6 months made hosting a pre-built connector library almost impossible. Now they can build an integration in the region of 1 to 3 weeks. 1 week for a more simple integration to go from design, build, test. 3 weeks for a more complex integration where you might have to, 1, have a large number of workflows, or 2, handle a system that's not quite standard in how we approach modern design. Then finally, previously, they were forecasting over a month for maintenance for API changes. So that meant every integration they offered, they were planning to have the bandwidth to handle a month of maintenance each following year. With Vasori, our ability to automate version control, automate maintenance, which I can get to a little more in a minute, meant that's now down to 1 to 3 days. Suddenly, with that, your overhead, your tech debt, your overhead maintenance to maintain an integration library of hundreds is now doable with a small team over a year. Whereas before, that team would have had to be substantially larger to handle that much maintenance for an integration library that large. The final piece here, and we haven't really touched on these points, is pre-built integration libraries work great for ERPs. But we all know that eventually you need to build a custom integration for a client. While this is focused on the integration marketplace, all these same benefits work when you have a professional services team building building custom integrations for a client. The same speed benefits, the same cost benefits, the same maintenance benefits all play in the same vein when you're building a fully custom integration for a customer. Okay, so just to touch on another question before we hop into the demo, Isabel asks, what deployment options do you offer? Vasori actually provides a full set of hosting architecture. So as part of our platform, we don't just build the integration for you, but our SDK plugs into our hosting architecture, can handle over 200 data messages a second, and it's designed to allow you to make hosting very easy. You can click deploy, and the system is good to go. It will then automatically plug in error handling, logging, any issue validation, all built within the platform so that you don't really even need to think about how to manage that. Now, if you do have a private cloud, if you do have an on-prem, happy to talk about that more in depth, and we offer solutions for deploying to both of those at the enterprise level. So I'm going to hop in and just show you guys the finished integration now that we have that complete, and then we can go from there. So you can see here that the platform's gone away and built the integration, and it's built it in two modes, as I mentioned, low code and a code version. The low code, you can see 2 flows. We've got a webhook to check for the order being paid in Shopify. It will then validate the webhook, check the processing status, look up the customer. If the customer does exist, it will just process an existing customer. If it doesn't exist, it will create the new customer as a request in NetSuite. It will then map the line items, look up the NetSuite items, and create the NetSuite invoice, and then log the completion. As I mentioned, it will handle logging for you. If we decided we want to run this on a scheduler, it will run the same integration, but on a scheduler. Now, you can also see the integration code. So if you now want to come in here and have full control to customize, that is simply works exactly like any other integrated development environment. You can come in, begin typing, very familiar to a developer. Some additional pieces within here, you can now view issues and logs. We also offer a full human readable format of transformation. This means as you begin to assemble documentation for your integration, if a developer leaves tomorrow and you need to hand the project to a new developer, this is all stored. If you're working as a implementer for a client, it also means that you don't have to spend the time building documentation. It's all done for you. Now, deploying the integration is really as simple as coming up here, hitting deploy, pushing this into production, and the platform will then push to live. Now, it won't do this here because I haven't added credentials for it to run any testing, but you can see how simple that would be once that's the case. Now, that about wraps integration example for today. As part of our ongoing ERP month, we are actually pushing live a updated NetSuite connector for today. So that includes all of NetSuite's recent updates, Also includes us pushing NetSuite's larger amount of documentation to our RAG system. You'll have seen that in the Sorry platform just there in the demo. Its understanding of NetSuite was already extremely thorough. That's because of this updated RAG that we've pushed to the back end of Sorry. So now it has much more thorough understanding of NetSuite as a system. If you have any other questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat and then I will answer them. If not, I'll also throw in there my Calendly. And if you want to book a one-on-one demo, I'll chat with any other team. We'd love to have that conversation. Matthias, I see you asked, does it handle multiple threads? So I assume by that you mean multiple workflows. And the answer is yes. I handed it a very simple, like single point-to-point integration, simply because for time, sometimes it can take 20 minutes to run for more complex logic. But yeah, you could hand it multiple workflows and it will go away and build them independently. And it's capable of separating those workflows in the agent so the agent doesn't cross them over. And so where we showed you the low code afterwards, it would just be multiple lines within that. Let me know if that doesn't answer your question or if I misunderstood your question. Okay. I think, Sophie, for today, that kind of wraps everything up. We'll stay on and give it a couple of minutes for any questions.
Oh, I think we've got another one.
Same workflow in parallel to create 100 sales orders in one system, and you want them in NetSuite ASAP. So you're asking like executions. Yeah, that's totally fine. If they create 100 orders in one system and we want to push them all to NetSuite, it would run the 100 orders through the integration. If the volume you're passing through either exceeds a rate limit or results in some form of error, the system will intelligently handle that. So it will put in place exponential backoffs, put in place retries, anything where there's a risk of system of integration breaking. And traditionally that would require a human having to go check the logs and try and fix it. Our platform will step in and either pre-build that into the integration design or intelligently handle that in production when required. I hope now I've actually answered the true question, Matthias, but definitely let us know if that's not the case. Let me just throw in a Calendly invite in here if anybody's interested in finding more time, and we're always happy to do that. But if not, as we said, Sophie and I will hang around for another kind of 2 or 3 minutes.